Millionaire's father is refused entry to the restaurant by a racist waiter. However, when he discovers who the restaurant owner is, in the modest silence of his small apartment, Harold was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills, notebooks, and notes that he himself had organized. He looked down at his tired hands, scarred by decades of hard work. He knew that every callus, every line on his skin, represented a sacrifice for the sake of his only son, Marcus. Harold sighed, thinking of what was yet to come. "The time is coming," he muttered to himself, looking at the last line of his financial notebook. For months, he had saved penny by penny with a single goal: to travel to the big city and finally surprise Marcus on his birthday. "This money is more than enough," he said, speaking softly as if to give himself strength. He had saved without spending it on anything other than the essentials. He even refused to buy a dessert he liked at the market. Every time he passed the shelf, he shook his head, determined. What he didn't spend on small things, he put in a tin can at the back of the cupboard. "Every penny is worth it," he thought, squeezing the metal tin in his hands. Harold relived in his memory the sacrifices of years ago. He remembered working the night shift to make ends meet for Marcus. At times, he would wake up only to see his son asleep on the sofa, notebook in hand and head resting against a pillow. They had been through so much together, and every time I thought about it, my chest would inflate with pride. "Papa, the memory of Marcus' childish voice echoed in his mind, bringing a smile to Harold's face. "When I grow up, I want to be just like you." Those words were engraved on Harold's soul. He, a simple man, had always wanted something great for his son. He remembered how he encouraged Marcus to study and work hard, even if it sometimes meant less time together. Harold was firm when he needed to be, but he was also soft-hearted towards Marcus' achievements, who had become the owner of a renowned restaurant in the city. "What do you know? Harold," he said, imagining himself in front of the mirror. "Your boy owns a restaurant now, and not just any restaurant either. It's one of those fancy ones that appear in magazines." It was true, and it made him want to participate even more in the world Marcus had built. For a long time, Harold couldn't be present at his son's big moments, but only followed his victories from afar. He watched news reports and read magazine articles about the restaurant's success, but he had never been there to see it all with his own eyes. "This year will be different," Harold murmured as he counted the money he had saved. He had planned to visit very carefully, wanting it to be a perfect surprise. Several friends told him to let Marcus know, maybe send a message. But Harold insisted on keeping it a secret. "I just want to see his face when he sees me coming through the door." He smiled, imagining the scene. The trip wouldn't be easy, especially for him, who hadn't left his neighborhood in years. But Harold was determined. Every difficulty seemed small in the face of the idea of seeing his son, of showing Marcus that he was always close by, even at a distance. This trip was a gift for Marcus, but deep down, Harold knew it was also a gift for himself. "Dad, when are you coming to visit me?" Marcus would ask on the rare phone calls. Maybe someday, my son, maybe someday," Harold would reply, always keeping his tone enigmatic. And at that moment, Harold got up from the table, went to the small kitchen cupboard, and took out the tin box. He dumped the contents on the table and began to organize the money calmly. It was enough. He counted and recounted, set aside the exact amount for transportation, and even managed to set aside a small amount for a special souvenir. "Now I just need to think of a present," he said out loud. The next day, he went to the local store where he had spent so many times just looking in the windows. Deep down, he had always wanted to give Marcus something special, but the budget didn't allow for great luxuries. When he entered the store, he looked around, trying to decide what he would buy. "Good morning, sir," said the sales assistant with a smile. "Can I help you with something?" "I'm looking for a present for my son," replied Harold, trying to disguise his excitement. "He owns a restaurant, and it's his birthday. I wanted to give him something that reminded him of that, you know?" The salesman looked at him for a moment and then showed him a luxury silver pen, packaged in a blue velvet box. "This one is very special, sir. It's a high-quality pen, excellent for signing important documents. Perhaps it will suit his work." Harold held the pen carefully, as if it were an object of great value, and then asked the price. The salesman answered, and he hesitated for a moment. The price was higher than he had imagined, but it was a gift worthy of Marcus. "I'll take it," he said firmly, feeling the weight of the investment, but knowing that it was a worthwhile sacrifice. When he got home, he wrapped the pen with the utmost care and put it in the suitcase he was going to take with him. For days, he reread the notes in his notebook, checked the money, planned every detail. He was prepared, and nothing could stop him from seeing the pride and surprise in Marcus' eyes. As he packed his things, Harold looked around his house and had one last thought. This trip is for him, to show that, even from afar, I've always been there for him. And with that, he picked up his suitcase, adjusted his hat on his head, and took a deep breath. In the silence of the early morning, Harold waited for the bus to the big city, his simple suitcase by his side, and the gift carefully wrapped. He gazed at the horizon, where the sky was beginning to lighten, reflecting on what was to come. It was the first time he had made such a long journey, and anxiety was mixed with hope. As soon as the bus arrived, he approached, greeting the driver with a respectful nod. "Good morning, sir," the driver replied, smiling. "First time traveling?" "Ah, yes, it's been a while since I've been on a bus," replied Harold, getting on and choosing a seat near the window where he could watch the scenery. As the bus began to move, Harold leaned back and let his thoughts wander. The road stretched out in front of him, as did the memories of his life with Marcus. He remembered how he had struggled to raise his son, facing so many adversities. Scenes from when Marcus was just a boy, eager to learn, curious about everything, popped into his head. "Dad," he remembered Marcus' voice in his mind. "One day I'm going to give you a big house like the ones we see on TV." And he always replied with an encouraging smile. "Don't worry about it, my son. I just want you to be happy." Harold smiled as he remembered the words. Marcus not only achieved his own success, but also became the owner of a renowned restaurant. Every kilometer he passed brought with it an avalanche of pride and gratitude. The bus went on for hours, passing through small towns, open fields, and distant mountains. Harold observed every detail, marveling at how vast the world was. With each landscape he passed, he felt that the long journey represented more than a trip. It was a kind of pilgrimage for him. After so many years of struggle, he was on his way to an important celebration, and not just Marcus' birthday. It was recognition for his son and, in a way, for him too. At one point, the lady next to him, who had been watching Harold since he sat down, asked him a question. "Are you visiting family?" she asked, smiling slightly. "Yes, yes," he replied, straightening his hat. "My son, I haven't seen him for a while. It's his birthday today." She smiled, her eyes reflecting a tender understanding. "What a blessing, isn't it, to see your children grow up and succeed?" "It is a blessing, ma'am," Harold agreed, looking out of the window. "He's become a very good man, a restaurant owner." There was pride in every word. "And does he know you're going to visit him today?" Harold chuckled and shook his head. "No, he doesn't. It's a surprise. I'm trying to imagine his reaction when he sees me coming through the door." She smiled, imagining the scene too. "They'll be so happy, I'm sure. There's no better present than a father's affection." The two of them continued talking for a few more minutes until the sleepiness of the trip overcame Harold. Tired from the night before, he laid his head back and fell asleep, lulled by the gentle snoring of the bus. When Harold woke up, it was morning. The sun was shining brightly through the window, and he realized that they were approaching the city. The traffic was getting heavier, and the surrounding scenery was now high-rise buildings, stores, and busy sidewalks. He adjusted his hat, straightened his shirt, and carefully checked the present in his bag, as if to make sure it was intact. As he got off the bus, Harold felt the grandeur of the city. Everything was bigger, noisier, and faster than he was used to. He took a deep breath and looked around, trying to find his way to Marcus's restaurant. He pulled out a small piece of paper with the address carefully written down. Holding his suitcase and the gift tightly, he began to walk through the busy streets. The sound of cars, the smell of coffee coming from the cafes, and the constant stream of people hurrying by created a new and fascinating scene for him. Although he had heard Marcus talk about life in the city, being there in person was completely different. On a street corner, he stopped in front of a shop window full of pictures of sophisticated dishes. He smiled, thinking how proud he was of his son for running a place that offered this kind of meal. For him, every detail he saw along the way seemed to be a foretaste of a success he would find in Marcus' restaurant. When he stopped at an information point, a friendly attendant noticed him. "Good morning. Do you need any help?" Harold showed her the address and explained that he was on his way to meet his son. "He has a restaurant here in town. It's his birthday today," he said, his chest heaving with pride. The attendant smiled. "How wonderful. I hope your visit will be special. If you need any help getting there, I'm here." Thanking her, he got back on the road, looking more and more anxiously at his watch. He felt a little nervous, but the anticipation of seeing Marcus' face made it all worthwhile. With every step, his heart beat faster, anxious for their reunion. When he finally reached the restaurant street, Harold stopped for a moment and took a deep breath. There he was, in front of the place where Marcus had built his dream. He looked at the elegant facade, the golden letters that formed the name of the establishment. He could hardly believe that this was his son's restaurant. "This is it," he said to himself, thrilled. "I'm home." Harold took a few steps, observing the movement of people coming and going. He imagined the interior of the restaurant, the tables, the kitchen where Marcus worked hard every day. He felt a wave of pride flood his chest once again. With the gift firmly in his hands and his heart racing, he approached the entrance door, ready for the surprise he had been planning. Harold was standing in front of the restaurant, absorbing every detail. He observed the elegant facade, the golden sign that announced the name of the establishment. He ran his fingers over the sign as if it were a relic, trying to absorb as much of his son's achievement as possible. His heart racing, he approached the door, straightened his hat, and entered, feeling the sophisticated vibe of the place. The salon was full of customers chatting quietly, creating an elegant atmosphere. Harold, still a little disconcerted by the refined atmosphere, looked around, trying to spot Marcus. He imagined his son suddenly appearing, with that sincere, boyish smile he always had, even now as a successful man. While he was trying to gather the courage to take another step, a young waiter approached with a cold, calculating gaze, noticing Harold's simplicity and immediately interpreting that he didn't belong there. "Can I help you, sir?" the waiter asked with a subtly condescending tone, looking him up and down. Harold smiled, unaware of the suspicion in the boy's eyes. "Ah, yes, thank you, lad. I'm here to see my son. He owns this restaurant. Today is a special day." The waiter frowned, clearly not believing it. "The owner of the restaurant? Your son?" Harold nodded, not noticing the tone of doubt. "That's right. His name is Marcus. I'm here for a surprise, you know. Don't tell him I'm here." He smiled, as if he were sharing a secret. The waiter, without hiding his contempt, crossed his arms. "Look, sir, this is a fancy restaurant, and I'm sure the owner doesn't have, relatives like you." The words penetrated Harold's chest like a needle, but he tried to ignore them. He took a deep breath and kept his tone calm. "I understand. But would you kindly call Marcus? Tell him it's a surprise." The waiter shook his head with a sarcastic smile. "You must be mistaken. This is no place for that kind of surprise. Perhaps you'd better look for another restaurant." Harold hesitated, feeling his discomfort grow. He realized something was wrong, but he didn't want to create a situation. "Young man, I've saved up a lot to be here today and surprise my son. So please just call Marcus. That's all I asked." The waiter took a step back, looking impatient. "Sir, I told you, I can't do that. Customers have to follow the standard of this place. And, with all due respect, you don't seem to be ready for that." Feeling his face flush, Harold tried once more. "Please, I'm not here to make trouble. I just want to see my son." "Listen," interrupted the waiter, impassive. "I don't want this restaurant to lose its standard because of unwanted interference. If you don't leave, I'll call the manager." Harold realized there was no point in trying anymore. He felt a heaviness in his chest, a sadness that suffocated him. The surprise he had planned was turning into humiliation. "Then please call the manager," he said, with a threat in his voice. "Maybe he can hear me." The waiter sighed, not disguising his irritation. "All right, sir. I'll sort it out my way." Before Harold could understand what was happening, the waiter went to the phone and made a quick call. Within minutes, 2 security guards arrived, accompanied by the waiter himself, who pointed at Harold. "Sir," said one of the security guards, "we've been informed that you're causing trouble here." Harold felt his blood run cold. "Trouble? No, I just wanted to see my son. He's the owner." The other security guard interrupted, with an impassive expression. "It's best if you accompany us to the exit. We'll avoid any further trouble." By now, some customers were beginning to notice the situation, looking curiously and disdainfully at Harold, who was trying in vain to defend himself. "I'm not making a fuss, I swear. I just want to see Marcus. He's my son," Harold insisted, his voice laced with frustration and shame. The waiter approached with a wry smile. "Look, sir, you'd better give up. People like you have no place here." Harold felt his face burn with shame and humiliation. This was supposed to be a celebration, an exciting meeting between father and son, but now it all seemed like a nightmare. He tried one more time. "Please, I just want—" The waiter shrugged and turned away, clearly disinterested. I said, "You'd better leave before this gets any worse." With no more arguments and his heart crushed by the rejection, Harold walked slowly out of the restaurant, observing the looks thrown his way. He wanted to cry, to scream, but he knew he had to control himself. He couldn't lose his composure. As he stepped out onto the sidewalk, he took a deep breath, trying to understand what had gone wrong. He thought about giving up and going home, but he couldn't accept that this was the end. He remembered every penny he had saved, every day he had worked, his dream of seeing his son happy when he received him. There was so much love and dedication in that gesture that he couldn't bear to see it all fall apart like this. Harold stopped for a moment, his eyes fixed on the entrance to the restaurant, and promised himself, "I won't give up." Outside the restaurant, Harold felt the weight of his humiliation like an anchor, pinning him to the ground. He looked at the golden sign with the name of his son's restaurant and wondered how it had all gone so wrong. After years of saving every penny, planning that surprise, his arrival had been marked by prejudice and contempt. But Harold didn't want that to be the end of his attempt. He had to try one more time, determined to continue. He took a deep breath, straightened his hat, and walked to the entrance, where a group of customers were leaving. He took the opportunity to enter the lobby and caught the eye of a receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, who wasn't there the first time he arrived. "Good afternoon, sir. What can I do for you?" she asked politely, noticing his bewildered expression. I'm here to see my son, Marcus. He owns this restaurant," Harold explained, trying to remain calm. "I'll come a long way to visit him for his birthday." The young hostess looked confused for a moment, but before she could reply, the same waiter who had approached him earlier appeared beside her, with a contrite expression. "Him again?" the waiter muttered impatiently, turning to Harold with the same look of disdain. "Sir, you have already been informed that this is not the place for you. Go back to your place, please." The receptionist looked at the waiter, surprised by his harsh tone, but he continued, ignoring any expression of protest. Harold, already exhausted by the whole situation, tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to see my son. He doesn't know I'm here. I just need a chance to talk to him." The waiter crossed his arms and smiled bitterly. "We've already said we can't do that. Please, if you don't leave, we'll have to call someone in to sort it out. Please, boy, I'm just asking for a moment." Harold's voice, which had tried to sound firm, now sounded tired and full of frustration. "He's my son." But the waiter remained implacable. "You've caused us enough trouble. Go away. This place isn't for people like you." The receptionist tried to intervene, looking at the waiter with concern. "Wait, maybe we should. He does want to talk to his son." The waiter shook his head, determined. "If we do this for one, we'll have to do it for all. That's how it starts. I'll sort it out." He picked up the phone, determined to call someone to remove Harold. Harold felt a wave of despair wash over him. Everything he had fought for, the surprise, the trip, seemed to disintegrate in front of his eyes. He wanted to insist, but he didn't know how. It was his son's birthday, and he couldn't even get into his restaurant. It was at that moment that the waiter, phone in hand, made a call. Harold listened, surprised, as he explained the situation in exaggerated terms. "We have a man who refuses to leave. He's causing a disturbance. We need someone to deal with it." Yes, exactly. While he waited, Harold looked around and noticed that the customers were watching him, some whispering and casting disapproving glances. The scene was far from what he had imagined. He felt his face flush with embarrassment, but he stood his ground, even though his voice was laced with frustration. Minutes later, 2 policemen arrived at the scene. The waiter approached them quickly, gesturing towards Harold and telling his side of the story, while the customers watched the scene with expressions of curiosity and judgment. One of the policemen approached, adopting an authoritative posture. "Sir, we were called here because you apparently refused to leave the restaurant. Are you creating a disturbance?" Harold tried to explain, keeping his voice calm but trembling with indignation. No, sir. I came to visit my son. He owns this place. I just wanted to surprise him for his birthday." The other policeman raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "The owner is your son. Is that it?" He looked at the waiter, who just shook his head in disbelief. "Yes," Harold insisted, struggling not to let his desperation show. "I've saved up for months, planned this visit. It's a surprise, you see. I just want to see him, that's all." The policemen looked at each other, and one of them took an impatient step forward. "Sir, we're not here for stories. The waiter told us that you're disturbing the atmosphere. We're gonna need you to come with us so we can sort this out." Harold shook his head, trying to maintain his dignity. "Please, sir, it's just a matter of talking to him. I'm not here to cause trouble." But before he could finish, the policeman was already directing him to leave, with no patience for explanations. With no other choice, Harold was escorted out of the restaurant, feeling powerless and humiliated, as if his presence had no value. The customers stared out of the window, some whispering, others looking indifferent, as he was taken to the police car. As Harold got into the car, he struggled to hold back tears. The feeling of injustice and contempt weighed on him like a dark cloud. He looked out of the window, trying to understand how it had all happened. One of the policemen glanced at him and asked, in a slightly less harsh voice, perhaps sensing the fragility in Harold's eyes, "Are you all right?" Harold, still not looking at him, answered softly, "I just wanted to see my son." The policeman remained silent. At that moment, Harold felt as if all his dignity had been trampled underfoot, and his dream of seeing his son on a special day had been taken away with him from that restaurant. At the police station, Harold was sitting in a cold chair in an empty, silent room. The atmosphere was stark and impersonal, the complete opposite of what he had planned for that day. He stared at the floor, trying to understand how a gesture of love and sacrifice had turned into something so painful. Marcus' birthday present was still in his hand, and he clutched the little box as if it were the only thing left of his dream. A policeman entered the room, interrupting his thoughts. With a stern look on his face, he handed Harold the phone to make his call. "You have the right to one call. I hope you use it wisely," said the policeman in a neutral tone. Harold nodded, and with trembling hands, dialed Marcus' number. As the phone rang, he tried to find the words to explain what had happened, not wanting to worry his son, but knowing he couldn't hide the truth. Marcus's voice finally answered, excited and carefree. "Hello, Dad? How are you?" Harold took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Hi, son. It's me, Dad." Marcus laughed on the other end of the line, not imagining what was happening. "Gee, Dad calling now? Are you all right?" Harold hesitated, feeling the tears threatening to fall. He didn't want his son to hear the pain in his voice, but there was no disguising it. "Marcus, I tried to surprise you. I wanted to be there with you today." His voice sounded tired, full of sadness. "I went to your restaurant. I wanted to see you." Marcus's voice, once relaxed, changed tone as he realized the tension in his father's words. "Dad, wait, you're in town? You came all this way?" Harold nodded, even though he knew his son couldn't see him. "Yes, son, I arrived and the waiter wouldn't let me in. And now I'm at the police station." Marcus was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. He could feel the pain in his father's words, and in a matter of seconds, the sadness was replaced by growing anger. "What? Dad, did they take you to the police station?" Harold tried to calm him down. "Son, I didn't want to cause trouble. I just wanted to see you, congratulate you. But they didn't listen. They just told me to leave." Marcus's voice became firm. "Dad, stay there. I'm going to the police station right now. I'll be right there, okay? Wait for me." Before Harold could reply, Marcus hung up the phone, leaving him with a mixture of relief and apprehension. He knew his son was coming, but the fear of being a nuisance still lingered. What he most wanted was for that day to have been different, a day of joy and surprise, not embarrassment. Minutes later, Marcus arrived at the police station, his face marked by fury and his heart racing. He entered without hesitation, going straight to the counter where a policeman was waiting for him. "I'm here to see my father. He's been unjustly detained. I need to speak to him now," said Marcus in a firm, authoritative voice that took the policeman by surprise. The policeman looked at him, trying to remain calm in the face of Marcus' intensity. "Sir, please stay calm. We'll sort this out the right way." "Sort it out?" Marcus said, visibly irritated. "You arrested my father without justification. He's an honest man who only wanted to see me on my birthday, and I demand that he be released now." The policeman, realizing that Marcus wasn't willing to listen to excuses, motioned for him to follow him to the room where Harold was waiting. Opening the door, Marcus saw his father sitting there, holding the present with trembling hands. The scene filled his chest with a mixture of sadness and indignation. "Dad," said Marcus, softening his tone as he approached. Harold looked up and, seeing his son, smiled, even though his eyes were watering. "Marcus, I'm sorry, son. It wasn't supposed to be like this." Marcus approached and put a firm hand on his father's shoulder. "Don't apologize, Dad. They're the ones who have to apologize here, not you." He turned to the policeman, who was watching the scene in silence. "My father is a dignified man, a man who did everything for me, who came all this way just to see me. And he's been humiliated, treated like nothing." The policeman tried to intervene. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus interrupted, without hiding his anger. "That's not a misunderstanding. That's prejudice. It's a lack of respect. You didn't listen to what he had to say, and you prefer to judge him by his appearance." Harold tried to calm his son down. "Marcus, please, you don't have to." But Marcus wouldn't calm down. "Yes, you do, Dad. They need to understand that this isn't right." Finally, the policeman bowed his head, realizing his mistake. "I'm sorry about what happened. It was a mistake on our part. Your father has been released." Marcus helped his father to his feet, putting an arm around him firmly. As they left the police station, Marcus promised that it wouldn't stay that way. His father deserved respect, and he would make a point of showing everyone in the restaurant that what had happened was unacceptable. As they walked out into the street, Marcus turned to his father, who still looked shaken. "Dad, you've come a long way, and I'm going to make it worth your while. Let's go back to the restaurant. Now, hold your head high." Harold tried to smile, but the shame was still there. "Son, I didn't want to give you this job. I just wanted today to be a special day." Marcus squeezed his shoulder tenderly. "Today is still going to be special, Dad. More than you know. We're going to show you that no one has the right to treat you like this." And with that, the two of them headed towards the restaurant. Harold didn't know what to expect, but he trusted his son. Deep down, he felt immensely proud of Marcus' firm and courageous stance. Marcus and Harold walked side by side to the restaurant, with a tense silence between them. Harold was still shaken by the experience, while Marcus, focused and indignant, felt his determination grow with every step. When they reached the door of the restaurant, Marcus stopped and looked at his father. "Dad, I want you to come in with me. Don't be intimidated, okay? This place is yours as much as it is mine," said Marcus, trying to reassure Harold, who was looking at the restaurant with a mixture of pride and fear. Harold nodded, trying to gather the confidence he needed. He straightened his hat and gave a slight smile. "I just wanted today to be a happy day, but I'm ready, son. Let's go." Marcus opened the restaurant door firmly, drawing the attention of all the staff and customers present. The previously quiet room was now filled with curious murmurs. The waiter who had mistreated Harold watched from afar, not understanding why Marcus was accompanied by the man he had thrown out earlier. Without wasting any time, Marcus walked to the center of the room, attracting surprised looks. He grabbed his father's arm and pulled him closer to ensure that everyone could clearly see the man next to him. "I want you all to pay attention," Marcus announced in a firm voice that echoed through the restaurant. "This is my father, Harold. He's come a long way to visit me for my birthday. And, for a serious mistake, he has been treated with prejudice and lack of respect." Harold looked down, uncomfortable with all the attention, but Marcus squeezed his shoulder, offering support. The restaurant manager, who until then had no idea what had happened, approached with a confused and worried expression. "Mr. Marcus, is there a problem?" Marcus looked at the manager, not hiding his frustration. "Yes, there was a very serious problem. My father was discriminated against and treated as if he had no value. And he was thrown out of this restaurant without anyone bothering to listen to what he had to say." The manager looked at Harold, now understanding the gravity of the situation. He cast a scolding glance at the waiter, who was still standing in the background, watching in silence. Trying to circumvent the unease, the manager spoke in a conciliatory tone. "Mr. Harold, we're sorry about what happened. I can assure you that this is not the way we treat our customers." Marcus, however, didn't seem satisfied. He looked directly at the waiter, who was avoiding his gaze, and his expression became even more serious. "I want you to come here," Marcus ordered, pointing at the waiter. The waiter nervously took a few hesitant steps towards Marcus and Harold. His expression was uneasy, and he tried to disguise his apprehension as he approached. Marcus stared at him with a firm, intense gaze. "Explain yourself to him," said Marcus, pointing to his father. "Tell my father why you treated him so disrespectfully." The waiter glanced at Harold, but then looked away, not knowing what to say. He stammered, trying to justify his actions. I was just following the standard of the house, Mr. Marcus. I thought that he wasn't a suitable client." "A suitable customer?" repeated Marcus, indignant. "He's my father, a dignified man who deserves respect, regardless of how he's dressed or where he's from." The waiter began to sweat, realizing that there was no excuse that could justify his behavior. I'm sorry, sir. It was a mistake on my part. It was a very serious mistake," replied Marcus, his tone unwavering. "Not only did you judge a man without knowing him, but you also showed prejudice and disrespect. And that's something I can't tolerate in my restaurant." Harold, who had been listening to everything in silence, finally looked at the waiter, speaking in a serene but sad voice. "I've come a long way, boy. I just wanted to see my son. I just wanted today to be a special day for him." The waiter bowed his head in shame, not having the courage to face Harold. Everyone in the room watched in silence, and some customers who had seen the scene started recording it with their cell phones, recording the moment when Marcus, in an act of justice, confronted prejudice in his own restaurant. Marcus turned to the manager. "I want everyone to know that I won't accept any kind of discrimination here. And that starts now with the dismissal of this employee." The manager nodded, aware that there was no alternative. He looked at the waiter and said firmly, "You can take your things and leave." With a red face and a visibly disconcerted expression, the waiter left the salon under the disapproving gazes of customers and co-workers. The scene was recorded by several people, who immediately shared it on social media. Marcus looked at his father and, with a slight smile, pulled him into a warm hug. "Dad, you deserve all the respect in the world. Today is your day too, and I wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect you." Harold, overcome with emotion, held his son tightly, struggling to hold back the tears. "You're my pride, Marcus. I didn't expect that you would do all this." Marcus smiled, still hugging his father. "I'm just honoring everything you've done for me. Today is a day of celebration, and I want everyone to know that you were the most important person in my life." With the atmosphere of emotion and respect restored, the customers applauded Marcus' gesture, and many congratulated Harold on his son. Social networks began to flood with messages of support and admiration for Marcus' attitude, which turned that difficult moment into a lesson in dignity and respect. At that moment, Harold realized that this was the best gift he could have received. Marcus's birthday was not just a celebration, but a milestone of justice and love that would remain etched in his memory forever. As the atmosphere in the restaurant began to calm down, Marcus guided Harold to one of the tables, making a point of seating him with the utmost care and respect. It was the first time Harold had sat there as a guest of honor, and he still felt a mixture of pride and discomfort at all the attention around him. As he looked around, observing his surroundings, Marcus bent down beside him and spoke in a softer tone. "Dad, this place is as much yours as it is mine. Everything I've achieved has only been possible because of your sacrifices. So please, make yourself at home." Harold took a deep breath, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. "Marcus, I didn't want to cause any trouble. I just wanted it to be a simple surprise, something to show how much I love you." Marcus held his father's hand tightly, giving him a sense of security. "Dad, you would never cause trouble. The problem was with the people who didn't recognize your value. And that will change, believe me." One of the employees, seeing the situation, approached, his face visibly moved. "Mr. Harold, it's an honor to have you here. On behalf of all of us, I want to apologize for what happened. It wasn't right." Harold smiled humbly and shook his head. "Thanks, kid. I just wanted to see my son. I didn't expect it to cause such a stir." Marcus nodded, looking at the official with an understanding gaze. "I appreciate the support, and it serves to remind us that every customer should be treated with dignity. My father is a simple man, but full of value, and no one can take that away from him." Harold felt a wave of emotion when he heard his son's words. He had always known that Marcus was a good person, but to see him take a stand with such respect and courage was something that touched his heart deeply. Marcus then looked around and saw that other customers were also watching. He stood up and, with a gesture of gratitude, thanked everyone for their patience and support. "I know what happened today was a bit unusual, but it just reinforces the value of respect and understanding between us. My father is the reason I'm here, and I hope this reminds us of the importance of treating everyone with dignity. A lady at a nearby table raised her glass and spoke in a firm voice, projecting for all to hear. What a beautiful lesson, Mr. Marcus. We could all learn a little from your example. A toast to Mr. Harold. The surrounding customers smiled, raising their glasses in homage to Harold, who was surprised and moved by the reaction. He looked at Marcus, who just smiled and nodded, encouraging him to accept the recognition. The lady continued, with a gentle smile toward Harold. You have raised a wonderful son, Mr. Harold. The respect and dignity he shows are the fruits of your upbringing. Harold, still a little embarrassed, tried to find the right words. I just did the best I could. Marcus has always been a good boy, and today, seeing the man he has become, I can only feel grateful. The atmosphere, once marked by tension, was now filled with a positive and welcoming energy. Other customers came up to greet Harold, expressing support and sharing words of encouragement. Each person seemed to want to show him that, despite everything, he was welcome there and that his presence was valued. In the midst of this outpouring of kindness, the manager approached, visibly moved. Mr. Harold, I can't tell you how sorry I am about what happened. As a manager, I have a responsibility to ensure that everyone is well received, and today I failed in my duty. I promise this won't happen again. Marcus put a hand on the manager's shoulder, making him look up. Thank you for your words, but it's important that everyone understands that this kind of attitude will never be tolerated here. My father, and anyone else who comes through this door, deserves to be treated with respect. Harold smiled encouragingly at the manager. It's all right, my son is sorted out. What matters is that, from now on, everyone here learns that a person's value is not in their appearance, but in what they carry in their heart. The manager nodded, grateful for Harold's words, and walked away, leaving them to their own devices. Marcus then turned his attention fully to his father, his face now serene. Dad, I want you to enjoy what we've prepared especially for you. And I promise that this will only be the beginning of many happy times we'll have here together. Soon after, he called one of the chefs to the table, who presented a sequence of special dishes, each carefully prepared to celebrate that moment. As the chef explained each dish, Harold watched in fascination, noticing the care and affection with which every detail had been thought out. Is all this for me? He asked, still surprised by the reception. Marcus smiled and nodded. Yes, Dad. You deserve every second of it. This is your place now, and I want you to know that you'll always be welcome here. Harold looked around, absorbing every detail, every expression of support and admiration he received. He felt welcomed, respected, and above all, loved. This was more than he had imagined, more than just a visit. It was a moment of redemption, recognition, and unconditional love between father and son. As the evening progressed, he allowed himself to relax and enjoy every moment. The weight of the humiliation he had suffered faded away, replaced by the affection and respect he was now receiving. And as he enjoyed the carefully prepared dish, he looked at Marcus with tearful eyes. Son, I couldn't be prouder of you, said Harold, his voice heavy with emotion. Today, you taught me something I already knew, but needed to feel again. It doesn't matter where we are, as long as we're together. Marcus smiled, holding his father's hand. Thanks, Dad. And I've also learned something important. Nothing in this world is worth more than honoring the one who gave us everything. Harold squeezed his son's hand, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced for a long time. That restaurant was now more than a symbol of Marcus' success. It was the place where he and his son had reaffirmed the most precious bond of all. That evening, after the special dinner, Marcus and Harold left the restaurant side by side. The air was lighter, and Harold finally seemed relaxed, feeling at peace. Their footsteps echoed along the quiet sidewalk, and each carried deep thoughts about what had happened that day. What had started out as a day of humiliation had turned into a night of reconciliation and honor. And Marcus wanted to make sure that moment was remembered forever. Dad, I wanted to show you something, said Marcus, looking at his father with a smile. There's a place here in town that I go to when I need to think, where the lights are so beautiful that they seem to illuminate my thoughts too. Harold smiled, interested. Then show me, son. I'm with you. They walked in silence through the city streets until they came to a bridge, from which you could see the glow of the lights reflecting on the river below. Harold stopped, admiring the beauty of the place. And Marcus watched his father's expression as if he was trying to capture every detail of that moment. "It's really beautiful," Harold murmured, his eyes fixed on the water, reflecting the city lights. "You know, Marcus, when I was younger, I never imagined I'd see something like this. All I wanted was to give you a better life." Marcus put his hand on his father's shoulder. "And you did it, Dad. Everything I am, everything I've built, was thanks to your sacrifices. I only succeeded because you always believed in me, even when no one else did." Harold's side moved. "Yes, I did, and I never had any doubt that you would go far. But son, what you did today, standing up to everyone to defend me, demanding respect, I never imagined that you would do something like that for me." Marcus shook his head, laughing slightly. "Dad, you're the most important person in my life. I would do that and much more. The truth is that you've always been my example, even when I was little and didn't understand. Your strength, your honesty, I wanted to be like you." Harold looked at his son, surprised and touched. "I don't know if I deserve all this, Marcus. I just do what I thought was right." Marcus took a deep breath, pondering his father's words. "You know, Dad, today I realized that you've always been right. People's value doesn't lie in their looks or their status. And seeing the way you kept your dignity, even though you were humiliated, made me feel proud. A pride I can't even explain." Harold lowered his eyes, moved, and looked at the river again. Marcus's words filled him with a deep satisfaction, as if, finally, everything he had been through had a greater meaning. He took a deep breath and, after a moment, faced his son again. "I've never told you this, but, Marcus, there was a time when I thought I'd never be able to give you a better life. There were so many difficulties that I thought about giving up more times than you can imagine. But what kept me going was the dream of seeing you happy, of seeing you build something with everything you've learned." Marcus squeezed his father's shoulder, absorbing every word with a tight heart. "And you did it, Dad. Everything I am, all the strength I have came from you." For a few moments, they were both silent, watching the lights dancing on the water. The night enveloped them with a quiet peace, and it was as if all the weight of the past had finally been left behind. Harold, his eyes watering, broke the silence. "You know, son, I've never had much to offer apart from my work, my effort, but seeing the man you've become is the greatest gift I could ever receive. I just wanted you to know how much I love you and how proud I am of you." Marcus, visibly moved, held his father's hand and spoke in a low tone, but full of intensity. "And I love you, Dad. That love is the basis of everything. And I want the world to see what I see, for everyone to know what an incredible man you are." Harold smiled, wiping away a stubborn tear. "You've already done that, son. Today, you gave me more than anything I could have dreamed of. I felt respected, valued. That's the greatest gift anyone can give." They stayed there for a few more minutes, exchanging memories and words of affection. Next to Marcus, Harold felt renewed, as if he had found new strength. He knew that from now on, he no longer had to fear the future because he had his son's support and love. Finally, Marcus looked at his father and said with a serene smile, "Dad, let's go home. We have a lot to celebrate, and I promise that every day from now on will be a good memory to keep in your heart." Harold nodded, full of gratitude, and as they made their way back through the city streets, they both knew that the bond between them was indestructible, stronger than ever. In the days that followed, the impact of what had happened in the restaurant took on proportions that Harold and Marcus could never have imagined. The scene of Marcus defending his father, demanding respect and justice, had been filmed by some customers and quickly spread on social media, being shared by thousands of people. The video of the scene touched the public deeply, and messages of support, empathy, and admiration for Harold and Marcus soon began to pour in. Inside the restaurant, the staff were now on alert, more attentive to their behavior with customers, and aware of the importance of treating everyone with dignity. The staff who were there on the day of the incident kept commenting on the impact of what they had witnessed. Many were inspired by Marcus and the courageous attitude he showed in defending his father. One day, while Marcus was organizing the hall, Harold entered the restaurant, now looking more confident. He approached his son, who was engrossed in his preparations, and gave him a gentle tap on the shoulder. "Marcus, can I talk to you for a minute?" asked Harold, in a calm but determined tone. Marcus turned and smiled when he saw his father. "Sure, Dad. Anytime." Harold took a deep breath and, with a discreet smile, began to speak. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, about how this restaurant is more than just a business for you. It's your dream. But after what we've been through, I feel that maybe it's time to do something different, something that reflects everything we've learned." Marcus frowned, curious. "What do you mean, Dad? Something different?" Harold nodded. "Yes, son. I thought maybe we could turn the restaurant into an example for other people. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through here. Maybe it's time we did something to make sure that everyone who comes in here is treated as an equal." Harold's words caused Marcus to reflect deeply. He understood that his father wanted to make that experience a lasting lesson, something that could impact everyone who walked through those doors. "Dad, I think you're right," said Marcus, with a twinkle in his eye. "We can establish some changes, something that goes beyond the basics and demonstrates, in practice, what we believe in. We can make this place an example of respect and inclusion." Harold smiled, feeling pride bloom in his chest. "That's what I wanted to hear, son. I know you already do this, but it's as if now we need to show everyone that we're firm in this commitment." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "We can start with special training for the employees, a program that talks about empathy, respect, and equality. Not just so that they treat anyone who comes in well, but so that they understand why it's important." Harold smiled, seeing his son's dedication to turning those ideas into something concrete. "That's the spirit, son. And maybe, if it's possible, we could even help other restaurants, other companies to adopt something similar." While they were discussing, some employees approached, listening to the conversation and showing interest. One of them, Sarah, a young waitress who had worked there for years, spoke up enthusiastically. "Mr. Marcus, I think this is an incredible idea. What happened to Mr. Harold really touched me, and I think it would be wonderful if everyone could understand the importance of respect. I myself would love to take part in something like this." Marcus smiled at Sarah, feeling the support of the team. "That's great to hear, Sarah. This is a mission I want us all to embrace. Every customer who comes in here should feel welcome, should feel valued." Harold looked at Marcus and the staff around him, touched by their receptiveness. "You have the chance to show the world that every person deserves respect, regardless of where they come from or what they wear. This goes far beyond just good service. It's about humanity." The employees agreed with words and nods, understanding the importance of what was being proposed. Marcus decided that this moment marked the beginning of a new era for the restaurant. Over the next few days, Marcus began to implement the changes. He hired a specialized team to provide training on inclusion and diversity. Posters were put up on the walls of the restaurant with messages reinforcing the commitment to respect and empathy. In a visible place in the restaurant, he even put up a sign with a phrase inspired by Harold himself. "Here, every person is valuable and will be treated with dignity." Word of the restaurant's commitment to these initiatives soon spread, and traffic increased significantly. People of all ages and backgrounds came to the restaurant, not just to taste the food, but to experience the welcoming and respectful atmosphere that Marcus and Harold had created. One afternoon, a journalist who had been moved by the story came to the restaurant to interview them. He wanted to understand what had motivated these changes and how Harold and Marcus saw the impact of the work they were doing. During the interview, the journalist asked Harold, "Mr. Harold, how does it make you feel to see your son turn a painful experience into an example of inclusion and respect?" Harold thought for a moment, his eyes shining with emotion, and answered simply, "I just want people to see the value in everyone, regardless of what they look like. When I look at what my son has done, I feel the sacrifice was worth it. He's changing lives here, and that gives me peace." Marcus put his hand on his father's shoulder and added, "All of this is because he taught me the importance of respect and dignity. This restaurant is a reflection of what he taught me, and I want him to know that his lesson lives on here." Their story was now not just a painful memory, but an inspiration to all who listened. The relationship between father and son, marked by respect and love, now had a real and positive impact on the world around them. Months have passed since Marcus and Harold implemented the changes at the restaurant. The respect and inclusion initiative they had established became a model that other local establishments began to follow. The community recognized the restaurant as a safe and welcoming space, and Harold and Marcus' story continued to inspire people of different backgrounds and ages. One day, when Marcus arrived at the restaurant, he found his father already at the table with a calm expression. Harold had become a frequent visitor, a true ambassador for the atmosphere, they had created together. The staff knew him well and treated him with respect and affection, and he made a point of greeting everyone with a sincere smile. Marcus approached, taking a seat next to his father. "I see you never miss an opportunity to visit us," he said with a smile. "Are you taking advantage of your retirement to give us a bit of extra work?" Harold laughed, shaking his head. Marcus, you know it's a pleasure to be here. Seeing what you've done with this place. It's like seeing a dream come to life every day. I never imagined that something as simple as a meal could become such a special experience for so many people." Marcus nodded in agreement. "I also didn't imagine that the restaurant would become such a symbol for people. It's gratifying to see how everything we've been through has served to transform other people's lives." Harold looked around, observing the cozy atmosphere that was filling up with customers. The restaurant was now frequented by a variety of people who felt welcome there, without fear of being judged. It was then that an elderly customer, who had been watching the two of them chatting, approached with a shy smile. "Excuse me, gentlemen. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I have to tell you that this place has changed my life." Marcus and Harold exchanged a curious look, and Marcus smiled at the lady. "Make yourself at home. We'd love to hear your story." She pulled up a chair and sat down with them, looking emotional. "I lost my husband a few months ago. He was everything to me. Since then, I've felt an immense loneliness, something that seems to have no end. But one day I read about your restaurant and decided to come. Here, I found something I'd been missing, a sense of welcome. I feel like I can come here, sit alone, and still feel accompanied." Harold looked at her with empathy, understanding the depth of her words. "That's exactly what we wanted to create. A place where people feel welcome, no matter what they're going through." The lady nodded, wiping away a discreet tear. "Thank you. This place has been a comfort to me. And seeing your story, this connection between father and son, reminds me of what really matters in life. Love, respect. These are the things we take with us." Marcus held her hand affectionately. "You will always be welcome here. This restaurant is the result of the love and respect my father taught me. Knowing that it touches someone's life gives us more strength to carry on." The lady smiled her silent thanks and waved goodbye, leaving them touched. Marcus observed his father's contemplative expression and smiled, seeing in him the same serenity and kindness he had always admired. Sometime later, as they walked through the restaurant, another employee approached Marcus. It was John, a young man who had recently started working there. "Mr. Marcus, Mr. Harold, can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked a little nervously. "Of course, John. Is everything all right?" Marcus asked, curious. John took a deep breath, looking anxious. "I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to work here. When I started, I was going through a difficult time. I lost my previous job because of a disagreement and I was demotivated. But here, I feel like I found a purpose. The way you treat people has inspired me to be better." Harold put a hand on John's shoulder, looking at him steadily. "I'm glad to hear that, John. This place was created with the idea that each one of us can make a difference, and you're part of that. Your work, your dedication, it all makes this restaurant what it is." Marcus agreed, smiling at John. "That's right, John. We're all a team, and every single person here is important. Never forget that." The young man nodded, clearly touched, and walked away with a new sparkle in his eyes. Harold watched, satisfied, as Marcus chatted with other employees and customers. He saw how his son's attitude impacted everyone around him, and he felt grateful to have been part of this transformation. As the restaurant began to close for the day, Marcus and Harold sat down again, enjoying the silence of the evening. The soft light of the restaurant made the atmosphere even more welcoming, and they could hear the murmur of satisfied conversations as the last customer said goodbye. "Looks like you've found yourself, Marcus," said Harold, smiling at his son. "This restaurant has become something far beyond a simple business." Marcus looked at his father, his eyes shining with emotion. "I was only able to do this because of everything I learned from you. When I was a child, you always said that the most important thing in life was character. I think I've somehow managed to turn those words into reality here." Harold nodded, touched. "And I couldn't be prouder. Today I see that it was all worth it, every sacrifice. You become a real man, Marcus. A man who has not only found success, but who knows how to use it for good." They stood there in silence for a few moments, each absorbing the depth of that moment. Harold knew that although the restaurant was a physical space, its true value lay in the people, in the connection that had been created there. As the sun set and the sky turned orange, Marcus looked at his father and said, "Dad, this place is as much your legacy as it is mine. I want you to know that every day we spend here together is a blessing for me, and I promise that I will continue to honor what you have taught me." Harold smiled, feeling at peace. He knew that this restaurant was much more than an enterprise. It was the result of a lifetime of values, love, and respect, and he could finally rest, knowing that Marcus would carry this mission forward. One morning, while Harold was enjoying his coffee by the restaurant window, Marcus walked in with a sparkle of excitement in his eyes. He held an envelope in his hands, and the expression on his face showed that something big was about to happen. "Dad, I need you to see this," said Marcus, handing the envelope to Harold. "We've received a special letter. I think you'll enjoy reading it." Harold took the envelope with curiosity, opened it carefully, and took out a letterhead. As he read the first few lines, his eyes widened, and he looked up at his son, trying to process what was written. "Do they want to reward the restaurant?" Harold murmured, almost in disbelief. "For our respect and inclusion initiative?" Marcus nodded, smiling. "Yes, Dad. The Chamber of Commerce wants to give us a community recognition award. They said that our story and the impact we've created here have been inspiring. We're going to be honored at their annual ceremony." Harold felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He held the paper with trembling hands, absorbing the significance of that moment. "Marcus, I never imagined anything like this would happen. All we wanted was to do the right thing, and now they want to recognize that." Marcus put a hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad, you deserve this as much as I do. This restaurant only became what it is because you taught me the values we carry here every day. This award is as much yours as it is mine." Harold, speechless, just nodded, struggling to hold back the tears. He had never sought recognition or fame. He had always lived with humility and respect, teaching his son that people's value lay in their attitudes and character. Now, this award seemed like a confirmation of everything he had stood for in life. That evening, Marcus organized a small meeting with the employees to announce the news. The employees gathered in the hall, some curious, others excited, as Marcus and Harold stood in front of them. "I want to share some special news with all of you," said Marcus, looking at each of the faces present. "We have been recognized by the Chamber of Commerce with an award for our commitment to inclusion and respect. And that's thanks to each and every one of you." The room erupted in applause, and smiles appeared on every face. John, one of the waiters, raised his hand, asking permission to speak. "Mr. Marcus, Mr. Harold, I just wanted to say that this award is much more than recognition. For me, working here has shown me the value of people and what it really means to respect others. Thank you for inspiring us every day." Harold, moved, nodded, and replied with a smile. "John, I'm the one to thank. You all make this place what it is. When we arrived here, after that difficult day, we just wanted to show the world that respect and dignity are fundamental. And to see that reflected in each and every one of you, that's what makes me proud." Marcus, seeing the sparkle in each employee's eyes, felt even more motivated. "This award is just the beginning. I want everyone to know that what we're building here is a legacy, and each and every one of you is part of it." While the team celebrated, Harold looked on, reflecting on how that restaurant had grown into something much bigger than he could have imagined. His son's dedication and love, combined with the essence of the values he passed on, had created an environment that impacted lives and generated change. On the day of the awards, Harold and Marcus arrived at the auditorium where the event was to take place. It was an elegant evening, and the hall was full of community leaders, business people, and city figures. As they were called to the stage, Harold felt a mixture of nervousness and pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the host, "today we celebrate an example of inclusion and respect, a true symbol of transformation in our community. The restaurant we all know, not only for its excellent service, but for the humanity it exudes. It is with great honor that we present this award to Marcus and Harold." Marcus, holding the trophy in his hands, stepped forward with a serene smile and looked at his father before beginning to speak. "This award represents much more than a professional achievement. It's a reflection of what I learned from my father, Harold, who always taught me the importance of honoring people for who they are, regardless of their origins or appearances." The audience applauded, and Harold, moved, couldn't resist taking the microphone to say a few words. I'm not a man for speeches, but I want you all to know how much my heart is filled with gratitude. This restaurant started out as my son's dream, but it has become something much bigger than we could have imagined. And what we've done is nothing more than what I've always tried to teach Marcus: to respect and value every person. Applause echoed through the auditorium, and father and son looked at each other with the complicity of those who had been through many battles together. The award in Marcus' hand symbolized not only the community's recognition, but also the victory of values that had been passed down from generation to generation. After the event, several people came up to congratulate them, sharing stories and words of support. Harold felt welcomed and respected, something that day in the restaurant seemed like a distant dream. "Dad, this is just the beginning," said Marcus as they walked out of the auditorium. "We've shown that respect and inclusion aren't just words, they're actions that can change lives. And we're going to keep going." Harold smiled, feeling the weight of gratitude fill his heart. "Yes, son, we'll continue. And may our example be a flame for others to make a difference too." And so, on that starry night, as father and son returned home, they knew they were building something that would go beyond time and remain as a legacy of love, respect, and dignity. After the awards ceremony, Marcus and Harold's story continued to spread around the city, attracting not only customers, but also people looking for advice and inspiration. One afternoon, while Marcus was organizing the orders in the restaurant, a young businessman walked in with an expression of admiration and a certain nervousness. He observed the surroundings carefully, absorbing the welcoming atmosphere that the restaurant exuded. On seeing him, Marcus approached with a friendly smile. "Welcome. What can I do for you?" The young man shook Marcus' hand, a little hesitantly. I'm Daniel. I own a small coffee shop on the other side of town, and, well, I came here because I've heard so much about you, about what you're doing in this place. It's inspiring. I was wondering if I could learn a bit from you." Marcus smiled, understanding Daniel's admiration. "Of course, Daniel. I'd be delighted to share what I've learned. Please sit down. We could talk while you enjoy a coffee from the house." As they sat down, Harold, who had been watching the scene, approached, curious to know what it was all about. Marcus introduced his father to the young businessman, and Harold sat down next to them, interested in hearing Daniel's story. "So, what brought you here, Daniel?" asked Harold, with the welcoming tone he always used with new clients. Daniel took a deep breath before answering. "I opened my cafe with a big dream. I wanted it to be a welcoming place where people would feel at home. But I've faced challenges, especially with the staff and the service. People don't seem engaged, and I feel that something is missing. When I heard your story, I realized that this is what I want for my business, a place where every person is treated with respect." Harold nodded, understanding Daniel's quest. He exchanged a look with Marcus and began to share some lessons. "You know, Daniel, in the beginning we also had our challenges," said Harold, with a serene look on his face. "But the secret, I'd say, is that everyone here has a purpose. Every employee understands that, more than serving, they are creating a space where every person matters. And that has to start with you, with the example you set." Daniel listened attentively, absorbing every word as a valuable lesson. "I see. So the example starts with me." Marcus joined the conversation, complimenting what his father had said. "Exactly. What's more, it's important that your employees feel valued. Here, we promote training and open up space for open conversations. We talk about respect, empathy, and encourage everyone to treat others as they would like to be treated." Daniel shook his head thoughtfully. "I never thought of approaching work in that way. I always thought it was just a question of offering a good product, and that was that. But now I see that the environment matters too." Harold smiled and continued. "The environment is everything, Daniel. When someone comes in here, they're not just looking for a meal. They're looking for an experience, something that makes them feel good. And that depends on what each person brings out in them." Marcus patted Daniel lightly on the shoulder, encouraging him. "Remember, you don't have to do everything at once. Start with small gestures. Talk to your team. Listen to what they have to say. Make them feel that they are part of the dream you are building. That's how you create a culture of respect and trust." Inspired, Daniel looked at them both with gratitude. "Thank you so much. You don't know how much this means to me. I think I finally have a direction, and I hope, one day, I can build something as special as this place." Harold nodded with a warm look on his face. Remember, Daniel, it's not about being the same as this place. It's about finding what's unique to you and the people around you. Respect and care are universal, but the way you express it is what will make your place special. With that, Daniel thanked her once more and said goodbye, promising to come back soon. As he left, he seemed more confident, as if he had found something he had been looking for a long time. After Daniel left, Harold looked at his son, visibly pleased. Marcus, it's amazing to see what we created. To know that other people are being inspired by our story. It's something I never imagined. Marcus nodded, reflecting on the impact they had. And all of this, Dad, is thanks to what you taught me. That day in the restaurant changed everything, but it was only the beginning. Today, we're helping others to understand that respect and dignity are the foundations for any relationship. Harold smiled, his face lit up with pride. You turned my lesson into something much bigger, son. And every time I see someone like Daniel, I'm reminded that everything we've been through has been worth it. That afternoon in the restaurant was more than just a conversation. It was proof that the change Marcus and Harold had started was continuing to expand, reaching new people and inspiring new stories. They hadn't just transformed the restaurant itself. They were creating a chain of respect and kindness that echoed far beyond the walls of the place. Harold, his heart full of gratitude, looked out of the window, observing life around the restaurant. He knew that his legacy was in good hands and that Marcus would continue to carry on the values that had transformed the small business into a symbol of hope and humanity. One quiet morning, while Marcus was organizing the restaurant's tables, he received an unexpected call from a local business association that wanted to invite him to give a talk on leadership and values at work. The news took him by surprise, but he immediately thought of his father, who had been the source of all the inspiration that had turned the restaurant into a special place. Marcus looked for Harold, who was in the lounge, always in his position of observer and advisor. With the phone still in his hand, he approached his father with a shy smile. Dad, I just received an invitation. They wanted to give a talk about what we've done here. They wanted to talk about leadership, about how the values we've established can transform the workplace, he explained, still taking in the idea. Harold laughed lightly, full of pride. And what are you waiting for? Accept it. You deserve this recognition, Marcus. Just hearing that they want to know about what we've done here, that's a great victory. Marcus nodded, still with a glint of doubt in his eyes. I'll accept, but I don't think I want to do it alone. The history of the restaurant is our history, Dad. It wouldn't have the same meaning if you weren't there with me. Harold raised his eyebrows in surprise. Me? You think they want to hear what I have to say? I thought these lectures were for important people. Marcus smiled, shaking his head. And who says you're not important? Dad, you're the heart of all this. If we're going to tell this story, I want you to be by my side. We're going to do this together. Harold pondered, visibly moved by his son's request. He had never imagined that his own life experience could serve as an example to others, even more so at a business event. All right, son, he said at last with a serene smile. I'll come with you. We'll tell our story together. The day of the lecture arrived, and Marcus and Harold entered the auditorium, where dozens of people were waiting for them. The atmosphere was full of curiosity and expectation, and Marcus felt a slight nervousness at the sight of the anxious faces. Beside him, Harold remained calm, inspiring his son with his calm and confident presence. As they took to the stage, Marcus began to speak, explaining the journey that had taken them there, from their first steps in a restaurant to the transformative impact they had achieved. He talked about the challenges, the day his father was humiliated, and the decision they made to turn that painful moment into a life lesson. The truth is that respect and dignity need to be in every detail, in every conversation, in every gesture, said Marcus, looking at the audience. And that was the greatest teaching I received from my father. Harold, listening to his son's words, waited until Marcus had finished before taking the microphone. He looked at the audience, who were watching intently, and spoke in his firm, serene voice. I am a simple man. I've spent my life working hard, doing my best to give my son a better life. And I always thought that all I had to teach him was the value of honesty, hard work, and respect. I never imagined that those things would bring us here today. Harold paused, and the auditorium fell completely silent. He continued, choosing his words carefully. When I was humiliated in the restaurant, I just wanted to disappear. But my son showed me that we don't have to accept a lack of respect. He showed me that we can demand dignity. And today, he makes me proud by showing the world that these values, the simplest values, are the ones that really matter. Marcus watched his father with admiration, seeing how his words touched everyone in the auditorium. He knew that this moment was a celebration of everything Harold had built, a confirmation that his father's legacy was alive and strong. At the end of the talk, people gave him a standing ovation. Many came up to thank him and share their own stories, moved by Harold and Marcus' account. One of the participants, an older businessman, approached with a twinkle in his eye. "Mr. Harold, your story reminded me of my own father," he said, shaking Harold's hand. "He also always taught me the importance of respect, but I somehow forgot that along the way. Today, thanks to you, I want to take back those values. I want to honor what my father taught me." Harold nodded, touched by the businessman's words. It's an honor to know that our story has helped in some way. It's never too late to do the right thing. Respect, my friend, is something we can offer at any time in our lives. Marcus, seeing the repercussions of his father's words, put his hand on Harold's shoulder, feeling the pride that filled him. "Dad, I think this is the start of something bigger. Our message is reaching more people than we could have imagined." Harold smiled, his face lighting up with the satisfaction of knowing that his simple example of life was touching other lives. "Yes, son, and that just makes me want to keep going, that more people can understand the value of dignity and respect." As they left the auditorium, Marcus and Harold felt that, more than a lecture, they had shared a mission. They understood that the restaurant story, built on such deep values, was something that could inspire even more people to look at others with empathy and dignity. And they knew that from then on, the impact of their words would continue to resonate in other hearts and minds, carrying on the true legacy they had built together. After the impact of the talk, Marcus and Harold felt they had found a new mission. The response from the people who heard their story made them realize the power of their words and the positive impact they could have. A few days later, while Marcus was in a restaurant, organizing the team for lunch, Harold walked in with a thoughtful expression, clearly with something important on his mind. "Marcus, I was thinking about what we said in that talk," Harold began, taking a seat in a chair near the counter. "I think our story can reach even more people. Maybe we can make something more permanent, something that continues to teach what we've learned, even when we're not around." Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at his father with interest. "What are you thinking, Dad? You seem to have an idea." Harold nodded with a slight smile. "I've been thinking that we could create a space inside the restaurant, a place where people can come together, share their stories, and learn about the importance of respect and inclusion. Not just for us, but for everyone who walks through these doors." Marcus considered the idea, excited. "That's a great idea, Dad. We can create a special space where we hold talks, workshops, and even community meetings. A place where our values live on and where everyone can contribute to spreading them." Harold agreed, excited by his son's vision. "Exactly. We don't need to do anything too big. Just a cozy space that makes people feel at home. And we can start with small events, perhaps bringing in people from the community to talk about their own experiences." Marcus smiled, visualizing what it could be. "So it's decided. We'll create this space, and it will be the heart of the restaurant, a place to connect and inspire. We can call it the Gathering Room." Harold nodded, liking the name. The Gathering Room? Perfect. A space where every story has value and every person is welcome. Over the next few weeks, Marcus and Harold began transforming one of the restaurant's rooms into a welcoming and inspiring space. They hung photos of customers and employees over the years, phrases of respect and inclusion on the walls, and even a small bookcase with books that encouraged self-knowledge and empathy. The environment came to life with soft colors, plants, and comfortable furniture, creating a space where people felt immediately welcomed. When the space was ready, Marcus decided that they would hold an inauguration event, inviting both employees and some former clients and members of the community. On the day of the opening, the restaurant was full of people who had come to support the initiative and see the new space. Harold was thrilled to see people's reactions. He looked at Marcus proudly and said, "Son, what we've built here is a dream I didn't even know I had. To see all these people together with respect and friendship, this is something I never imagined." Marcus put a hand on his father's shoulder and smiled. "All this is thanks to what you taught me. And now we can continue to pass these values on so that more people feel valued and respected." During the event, Marcus gave a short speech, explaining the purpose of the meeting room. He spoke about the impact that respect can have on everyone's life and how this space was an invitation for everyone to come together and learn from each other. "Today, I want you to know that this space belongs to you," he said. "We want every person who enters here to feel welcomed, respected, and listened to. Let this be a place of sharing and learning, where every voice matters." The audience applauded, and many came up to congratulate them. Customers who had frequented the restaurant for years told stories of how the welcoming atmosphere had helped them through difficult times, and some employees also shared how working there had transformed their lives. One of the customers, a woman called Laura, stood up and asked to speak. With her eyes watering, she told her own story. "When I started going to this restaurant, I was going through a very difficult time, but the way I've always been treated here, with such respect, has helped me rediscover my own strength. This place is a refuge for me. And now, with the gathering room, I'm sure many other people will find the support they need." Harold listened to Laura's story with a heart full of gratitude. Knowing that the restaurant and the new gathering room had become a place of support and inspiration for so many people moved him deeply. He approached Laura after her story, holding her hands lovingly. "Laura, knowing that this place has been able to do something for you is all we could wish for. Thank you for sharing your story with us." Marcus watched in awe at the genuine connection his father created with each person and felt that everything they did was becoming a bigger movement, a transformative force in people's lives. That evening, as the event drew to a close, Marcus and Harold chatted as they closed the restaurant. The gathering room was empty now, but the energy of the event still vibrated in the room, leaving an atmosphere of fulfillment and peace. "Dad, today was the start of something incredible," said Marcus, looking around the room with a glimmer of hope. "I think now our restaurant is more than just a place to eat. It's a home for everyone who needs a space of respect and understanding." Harold nodded, touched. "Yes, son, and may our gathering room always be a beacon for those who seek solace, friendship, and respect. That is the greatest legacy we can leave." They stood in silence, contemplating the space they had created together, feeling certain that, through the meeting room, they would continue to touch lives, inspire change, and promote the value that each person deserves. A few months after the gathering room opened, Marcus and Harold's initiative had become the center of attention in the restaurant. The space had consolidated itself as a point of connection where customers, employees, and community members shared experiences, discussed ideas, and, above all, found mutual support. Every day, new stories were told there, and Marcus knew that the idea he and his father had was turning into something even bigger than they had imagined. One spring morning, while Marcus was organizing the room's event schedule, he received a message from one of the restaurant's regular customers, Mr. Allen, an elderly man who always sat in the same corner, near the window. The message requested a meeting with Marcus and Harold. Intrigued, Marcus approached his father to share the request. "Dad, Mr. Allen wants to talk to us. He says it's something important, and it involves our meeting room." Harold, curious, nodded. "Mr. Allen is a good man. He's told me a few life stories and always seemed grateful for the space we offer here. Let's see what he has to say." Later that afternoon, Mr. Allen arrived at the restaurant and was greeted by Marcus and Harold, who guided him to a reserved table in the meeting room. Allen's expression was serious, but there was a calmness in his gaze that inspired confidence. "Marcus, Harold, thank you for taking the time for me," he began, his tone serene. "I'm an old man, and for years I've been involved with various initiatives to help the community. I always believed that a supportive space where people could come together and feel welcome was what many of us needed. And then I found exactly that here, in your restaurant." Harold smiled, listening carefully. "Mr. Allen, that's the highest compliment we can receive. Our intention has always been to create a place where people feel respected and welcomed." Mr. Allen nodded, touched. "And you succeeded. This place has become a refuge for many, including me. But I want to propose something that might expand this idea of welcome and support." Marcus leaned forward, interested. "We're listening, Mr. Allen. What do you have in mind?" "Well," he continued in a quiet voice, "I'd like to fund a project here in the meeting room. My idea is that we can offer free talks and workshops to the community, especially to young people who are starting out on their journeys, and to the elderly who often feel isolated and forgotten." Harold and Marcus exchanged a look of surprise and admiration. Mr. Allen's idea not only broadened the mission of the gathering room, but also reinforced the values that had motivated them to create it. "Mr. Allen," said Marcus, his voice filled with gratitude, "this is an extraordinary proposal. With these workshops, we could reach even more people and help build an even more united community." Harold added, looking directly at Allen, "This project is a blessing, and you have our word that we will do everything we can to make it a success. This space is for everyone, and this initiative only reinforces the idea that we're on the right track." Mr. Allen smiled, satisfied with the answer. "Thank you. I know you're the right people for this. I hope this project will take forward everything you've already built here, touching lives that may not have the support they need to face the challenges of everyday life." In the days that followed, Marcus and Harold dedicated themselves to organizing the first series of meeting room workshops. They contacted volunteer professionals in the fields of mental health, financial education, and entrepreneurship, as well as other entrepreneurs who could inspire young people and adults with their stories. With Mr. Allen's support, the initiative began to take shape, and the local community responded enthusiastically. Finally, the day of the first workshop arrived. The hall was packed with young people, adults, and the elderly, all curious and eager to take part. Marcus and Harold watched the movement with satisfaction, and next to them, Mr. Allen looked thrilled, as if this moment was the realization of a long-held dream. The first speaker was a local psychologist, Dr. Rosa, who began by talking about the importance of emotional well-being and how human connections are fundamental to mental health. "We all need to be heard and welcomed," she said, looking out at the audience. And that's exactly what the gathering room represents, a safe space to share our pain, our achievements, our lives. Harold, hearing her words, felt a surge of gratitude and pride. He realized that the room was fulfilling a role that went far beyond the restaurant. It was a welcoming space, a place where each person could feel valued. During the break, a young man called Leo, who was taking part in the workshop, approached Marcus and Harold. His eyes were shining with enthusiasm, and he was holding a notebook in which he had written down everything he had learned. "I wanted to thank you for creating this space," said Leo, with a shy smile. "I always had the dream of starting my own business, but I never had the support. This workshop has given me clarity and made me believe that I can achieve my goals." Harold put a hand on the young man's shoulder, smiling empathetically. "I'm very happy to hear that, Leo. May you take these lessons with you wherever you go. And remember, whenever you need advice or a space to think, the meeting room will be here for you." After the event, Marcus and Harold stayed in the meeting room for a few more minutes, watching the last participants say goodbye. The room was now empty, but there was a palpable energy in the air, as if the space was still charged with all the stories, dreams, and hopes that had been shared there. Harold looked around and smiled at his son. "Marcus, I think we're doing exactly what we should be doing. This room has become something bigger than we could have imagined. And it all started with the respect and love we've built here." Marcus nodded, touched. "Dad, this only makes me more sure that we're on the right track. The gathering room has become a beacon for all of us, a place where people find more than support. They find hope." Harold put his hand on Marcus' shoulder, feeling the gentle weight of realization. "And so be it, son. May our meeting room continue to be a light to those who seek a little understanding and dignity." That night, as they closed the restaurant, father and son felt that, with the support of Mr. Allen and every person who walked through those doors, they were building something that would stand the test of time. At the last event of the year in the gathering room, Marcus and Harold organized a special celebration, bringing together everyone who had taken part in the workshops, talks, and meetings over the months. The room was decorated with soft lights, tables adorned with arrangements made by the staff themselves, and a mural where people pasted messages of thanks and inspiration. It was a living symbol of everything the space had become. As guests arrived and greeted Harold and Marcus, the restaurant was filled with an energy of gratitude and joy. Among those present were former customers, employees, and even people from the community who had heard about the meeting room and were coming for the first time to get to know the place that had become a benchmark for welcome and solidarity. At the start of the evening, Marcus took to the small, improvised stage in the room and asked for everyone's attention. He observed the crowd, each familiar face, each smile that reflected the connection they had built together. "Good evening, everyone," Marcus began with a warm smile. "Today, we want to thank each and every one of you for being part of this journey. When my father and I created the gathering room, our hope was simple: to create a place where everyone felt welcome and valued. But you turned it into something much bigger than we imagined. Harold, who was standing next to his son, took the microphone and continued, his voice laced with emotion. You brought your stories, your lives, your hopes to this place. Each one of you has contributed to making the meeting room a space of unity and respect, and that's more than any parent could ask for. The audience applauded, with some discreetly wiping away tears, touched by Harold's words. He and Marcus were like emotional anchors, pillars that held that project together and inspired every person present. Then a client, Mrs. Evelyn, raised her hand, asking to speak. Marcus encouraged her to speak, curious about what she would like to share. I just wanted to say, she began, visibly moved, that finding this place was like finding a family. When I lost my husband, I thought my life wouldn't make sense anymore, that there would be no room for me anywhere. But when I came here, I found people who listened to me, who gave me support without asking for anything in return. You, Marcus and Harold, gave me a home. Harold, his eyes watering, approached her and took her by the hand. Mrs. Evelyn, you are part of our family. This place is yours as much as it is ours. That's what we want. For every person who crosses these doors to feel that they are never alone. After Evelyn, other participants began to share their experiences, each telling how the meeting room had impacted their lives, helping them to overcome challenges, find new friends, or simply rediscover their own strengths. Each story seemed to carry a genuine emotion, and the room became a chorus of gratitude and belonging. Marcus looked at his father and saw on his face the satisfaction of a man who had dedicated his life to values that were now shared and celebrated by so many. He realized that the evening was a tribute to his father's legacy, a legacy of love and respect that now lived on in every person present. When the stories ended, Marcus thanked everyone once more and invited them to toast together. He raised the glass and, with an emotional smile, declared, "May the meeting room continue to be a beacon of hope and welcome for everyone. May each person who comes here find peace, strength, and, above all, respect." Everyone toasted, and smiles and laughter filled the room. For the rest of the evening, people chatted, shared memories, and enjoyed each other's company, celebrating what they had built together. At the end of the evening, when the last guests were leaving, Marcus and Harold stood in the meeting room, now empty and silent, but still full of the energy of everything that had happened there. Harold looked around, absorbing every detail, and then turned to his son with an expression of deep satisfaction. "Marcus, I think we've achieved something that few people ever do. We've created a place that will be remembered, not for what we have here, but for what we offered each person." Marcus nodded, putting his hand on his father's shoulder. "Yes, Dad. This space is a reflection of everything you taught me, and I hope that in the future, many will still find here what we have been searching for, a place of peace, dignity, and love." Harold smiled, feeling the light, sweet weight of accomplishment. And that's the greatest gift I could ever receive. To know that, no matter how long it takes, something of both of us will remain forever. Father and son left the meeting room with their hearts at peace and the certainty that, together, they had built more than a restaurant or a room. They had created a legacy, an inheritance of values that would continue to inspire and welcome people far beyond their own lifetimes. Years have passed since Marcus and Harold opened the meeting room. The restaurant and the space became a symbol in the city, a point of support and welcome for everyone. Marcus now ran the restaurant alongside his own family, and Harold, now elderly, made less frequent visits due to his delicate health. But even in his old age, he always smiled to see how the place had prospered and how the space they had created continued to transform lives. One sunny afternoon, Marcus organized a special event in his father's honor. He had planned a surprise to celebrate Harold's impact on the community, something that would eternalize the legacy of respect and empathy he had passed on. In the hall decorated with flowers and photos that told the story of the meeting room, former clients, employees, and friends gathered, waiting for the ceremony to begin. When Harold arrived, he was greeted with warm applause. Surprised, he looked around, his eyes watering. "Marcus, what's all this? I didn't expect a party like this." Marcus smiled, guiding his father to a chair at the front of the room. "Dad, Today we're here to honor everything you've done. Not just for me, but for every single person who has passed through this place and been touched by your example." An emotional Harold nodded, looking around at the familiar and affectionate faces that accompanied him. People of all ages gathered, each with a special story about the impact he had made. During the ceremony, several people stood up to share their stories. Laura, one of the first clients who had found support in the gathering room, spoke with a broken voice. "Mr. Harold, you were like an anchor for me when I needed it most. I've never felt as welcome as I do here, and it's changed my life." John, one of the employees who had accompanied Harold and Marcus from the beginning, also spoke, holding back tears. "You taught me what real respect is. Working here has changed me, and I'm eternally grateful." Harold, touched by everyone's words, just nodded, struggling to contain his emotion. He never imagined that his simple gesture of creating a welcoming and respectful space could have such a profound impact. He looked at Marcus, who was standing next to him, his eyes shining with pride. Then Marcus stood up and asked for everyone's attention. "Today, we want to do something special to eternalize my father's legacy," he said, holding up a plaque covered in fabric. "The meeting room has always been a symbol of everything he taught me, of everything he stands for. And it is with great honor that, from now on, this space will officially be called the Harold Community Center Gathering Room." As he said this, he removed the cloth, revealing the golden plaque with the new name of the place. Everyone applauded, and Harold, seeing the tribute, felt tears run down his face. "Marcus," he began, his voice shaking, "I don't know what to say. I never thought anything like this would happen. This is the greatest gift I could ever receive, knowing that what we've built together will continue to help people. It's more than I could have dreamed of." Marcus hugged him tightly. "Dad, all this was only possible because of you. You planted the seeds that today have grown into a tree that welcomes everyone. The Harold Community Center will be an eternal reminder of your example, of your kindness." After the tribute, the guests began to circulate around the room, looking at the photos and stories that decorated the space. One young woman, who had never met Harold in person, approached him and looked at the newly unveiled plaque. With curiosity, she approached and smiled, saying, "Mr. Harold, I've heard a lot about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. I just wanted to say that, although I've never met you before, I feel I've learned a lot from you. This place has changed my life. I feel like you're like a grandfather to all of us." Harold smiled, touched by her words. He took the young woman's hand gently and replied, his voice serene, "My dear, knowing that this place can make a difference to people like you is all I need. May you always carry with you the respect and affection you have found here." The young woman nodded, and the two shared a moment of deep connection, as if, somehow, the meeting room bound them in an invisible bond. At the end of the night, when everyone began to leave, Harold and Marcus stayed in the empty room, absorbing the calm and gratitude that filled the space. Harold looked around, seeing on those walls not only the stories of others, but also his own. "Marcus, I can leave in peace now, knowing that what we've done here will continue," said Harold with a peaceful smile. "That's the greatest gift I could have received." Marcus held his father's hand with a lump in his throat. "Dad, you will be remembered in every detail of this place. Your example will live on forever." And that night, father and son left the gathering room together, aware that Harold's legacy was forever embedded not only in that space, but in the hearts of every person who had ever passed by, seeking welcome, respect, and hope. If you enjoyed this video, comment your age and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And if you'd like to see more content like this, we prepared the next video just for you. Click here to watch